child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will be brighter. Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier.
Children should have education and clothes and food to eat and a house and love and care.
We'll put it together and we'll get it. Someday, yeah, we'll walk in the rays of a beautiful song. Someday when the world is much brighter.
To actually see people appreciating what these guys are doing in here is just, it's quite a humbling experience.
Ooh, things looking brighter.
This is a really exciting moment to be at Save the Children. In the last few decades, we've made dramatic progress in reducing child deaths, in getting children into school, in helping children fulfill their potential. And the challenge to us, the point of Ambition 2015, is could we accelerate that change? Could we be the generation and make sure that no child dies from a preventable illness like diarrhea or pneumonia, that every child gets a chance to go to school? Ambition 2015 is a roadmap to get us there.
We will help save 15 million children through delivering world-class programs. We will have a strategic focus in 21 countries and build 10 new signature programs around our breakthrough issues, in particular child survival, education and UK child poverty.
We're taking our humanitarian work to another level of impact to save even more children's lives in the toughest places, with frontline health workers, a humanitarian academy, and an integrated media, advocacy and communication surge.
We want our work with children to be the cause of millions. We're going to be reaching out to millions of people in the UK to involve them in this fantastic cause.
We're going to find new ways to engage the public, telling compelling stories about how together we're changing children's lives, wherever they are in the world, even places like this, Capoeira in South Sudan.
We'll be recruiting 1 million supporters and setting a fundraising target of £500 million from voluntary fundraising.
The rest of the funds, 700 million, will come from the strategic relationships we're planning to build with 7 key institutional donors, like this one.
We're going to build strong partnerships with companies, opinion formers and of course political decision makers to push for change at the highest levels.
The way we work will change.
We'll be more ambitious, more creative, more collaborative.
We'll be more agile, able to make the most of new opportunities and breaking news.
We'll build an outstanding organisation.
With high-performing people.
And enabling technology.
This is a very ambitious plan. The key to its success is our people, and that means you. Working for Save the Children is more than just a job, or even a vacation. It is a privilege. We have made dramatic progress. We are at a tipping point in history. We could be the generation to ensure no child is born to die of preventable illnesses. Every child is educated, and every child has a fair chance in life. We could be the organisation that accelerates this change, and we'll do this by directly helping millions of children through our world-class programmes, collecting the evidence of what works to replicate this on an enormous scale, mobilising millions of people around the world to our cause, and harnessing the power of partnerships. If we are successful, we'll have dramatically changed the world for children, and you will know you have played a big part in making this happen. Thank you.
Hello there. Thanks for coming along to see us. We've got about half an hour with you. I'm Gerry from SkillPill. I'm the founder of SkillPill, and I want to introduce my good friend Sam from Save the Children as well. I'm going to set a little bit of context of what today is going to be about, and then feel free to ask some questions. At SkillPill, we feel privileged on a voluntary basis to work with Save the Children, and we want to share some of the insights that we've gathered over the last 3 years of collaboration. If we have any insights, it's around mobile and how to get content out to sometimes quite difficult areas. And our mandate really is to try and be a support and a resource to folks who are doing, in my view, the real work out there. And in my view, as a tiny operation at Skillpill, if we can make a tiny difference, then it will all have been worthwhile. Sam's going to talk a little bit about Save the Children, because she knows all about that, but also from a learning perspective, some of the challenges she's faced. We did quite some extensive research last year, which we want to share with you. We did a big case study, ASTD in Washington, in May of last year, and some of those insights are still valid, and I want to share those with you as well. So really it's just talking a little bit about how we kind of create and syndicate content and some of the impact that that may be creating as well. So I'm going to start with Sam, if you want to say a few things, and then walk you through a couple of slides from the perspective of Save the Children and her ambition in terms of trying to drive people growth across the organisation.
Thank you, Gerry. Hi everyone. Gosh, that's loud. I'm Samantha and I work for Save the Children. I'm the People Development Manager at Save the Children, and I work in a team of 8 L&D professionals at the UK office, and we have an organisation of 15,000 members of staff. So as you can imagine, 8 divided into 15,000 means that actually, you know, the work that we do doesn't always reach everybody that we want to reach. So one of our key priorities is looking about how can we be much more accessible in terms of providing capacity building to our staff around the world. And that's why we formed a partnership with Skillpill. So one of the first things we looked at doing was, what is it that we need all members of staff to know? How can we reach people all over the world? What platform do we need to use? And we did some research around this, and you know, having been to a lot of these places myself, recognised that absolutely everyone had a mobile phone. It's just the way it was. That's the way that they communicated. It wasn't always the best mobile phone. A lot of them were very standard Nokias, but everyone had a mobile phone to communicate. And we found that in many countries they were already using mobile technology to actually deliver information to their staff without actually any infrastructure in place. So we thought, actually, this is a really great way for us to engage staff on doing what they're already doing. So we formed a partnership with Skillpill to look at actually how can we then reach these people more effectively than we're currently doing. So one of the ways that we did this was we looked at some core learning. So we looked at our vision, mission, values, you know, kind of what Save the Children stands for, so that everybody would know what that information is wherever they were in the world. Code of conduct, child safeguarding, safety and security. These were all ways that we could have small videos that could reach absolutely everyone without us having to go over and provide training. So we filmed a partnership with Gerry, and part of that was around something called the Global Give Back. Now, we are part of a consortium of NGOs, so there's over 80 NGOs around the globe that come together and that work collaboratively together. So we're trying to you know, make sure all our resources are going to the people that matter and not duplicating. But they do an event called Global Give Back. And part of that event is they give an award to people who have done the most kind of innovative pieces of learning technology throughout the year, and we were very lucky that actually we were shortlisted for that award with a piece of content that Gerry provided, which I'm sure you'll show us now. So this was around our vision, mission, values.
Save the Children is a rights-based organisation, which means that by working for Save the Children, we're committing to endorsing children's rights in everything we do. If any of us fails to act in a way that's consistent with our values and principles, we fail collectively as an organisation. Our guiding principles, put simply, are 1. Respect others, regardless of gender, disability, ethnicity, religion, and other aspects of identity. Act fairly, honestly, and tactfully to treat people with dignity and respect. 2. Work actively to safeguard children. 3. Maintain high standards of personal and professional conduct. 4. Seek to protect the safety and well-being of yourself and others.
Well, one thing I just wanted to point out in terms of the style there, and something we might share a little bit more generically, is that when you get to mobile, the classic fixed video isn't as efficient as the more mixed media that you see there. So essentially, the research that we've done is that moving to a mixed media environment that you see there animated is twice as efficient in terms of getting messages across, and also content retention and levels of engagement as well. So we've worked out that particularly on the go, you have about 3 minutes worth of time to get your message across, get your learning across. Otherwise people drop out really radically. And the second thing is the sense of duration on a smaller screen is different than duration on a bigger screen. So if I showed you this content on a mobile phone, it would feel much longer. So we've been kind of creating the content in a way that is consumable, if you like, in an on-the-go environment. And that's why you see the style produced in a particular fashion. And lastly, probably one of the most important things is that when you want to distribute content digitally on the go, mobile, the tone of voice needs to shift from being prescriptive to being more coaching or buddy style. So even though these are compliant messages, in reality the tone of voice is very important for consuming. People are much more resistant to prescriptive or didactic tones of voice when you're trying to drive content across mobile environment. Okay.
So as you can see, it's very simple. We had 5 pieces of content that were developed by SkillPill, and to be honest, it was a struggle to get buy-in, an absolute nightmare. And some of the reasons were we were going through restructural change, but we also had the barriers where you had senior management that even though they were using this in their day-to-day lives, they still couldn't see it as an effective learning tool. So we really, really struggled with getting buy-in. Funnily enough, where we did get buy-in was obviously the people that were reaching it, that were asking for it in the field, and they wanted it, and you know, it was very accessible. And it's taken quite a shift, 2 years to be exact. I've been on maternity leave twice in that time, and you know, we're still kind of slowly going there and trying to get kind of the buy-in that we'd like to see. But the struggle was really in getting people to be agreeing on stupid things that we would consider stupid about kind of, is the branding the correct branding? Are the modes the right modes? You know, it just went on and on and on. And we want, whenever you do something like we've done here, where it's an organisational message, the amount of people that want to be involved in the sign-off was enormous. So we had not only Save the Children UK, we had Save the Children International, Save the Children Denmark, Save the Children Sweden, Save the Children US. You know, every single Save the Children member you could possibly imagine wanted to be involved in the sign-off. And so we really struggled with actually, you know, how do we then proceed with this? And a kind of way that we've done it is we've gone a roundabout way, is we've worked closely. Gerry has been very patient with us in doing this. But what we've done is we've taken advantage of some generic material that SkillPill provide called their management shortcuts, and we've linked them to our programming work. So some of the stuff that we're doing around our management capability project. So things such as, you know, performance management, coaching, all of the models that we're currently using already in some of our face-to-face and online courses, we've been able to use as part of the mobile. And suddenly there's been real interest now from senior management in seeing that this actually works. And we're able to now revisit the more core messages that we started with, that we had such a struggle with, and people are now seeing a real interest. So for us, that's been kind of quite an eye-opener, because we thought that actually people would be more interested in our core messaging, but it seemed as though for us it was the other way around, that they wanted to see that it worked before they were willing to put any kind of commitment in place to actually roll this out further. So for us, that was a key lesson. Obviously, depending on your organisation, it would be dependent on how you use it. Some of you may have the same challenges that we faced. Another thing that we found that was really key was making sure that we had the right champions around the world. So we're lucky in the sense that in our department, a lot of us do get to travel and do work in these countries and are able to actually have conversations and hear what our staff want, hear some of the challenges that are being faced. So we're able to work directly with them about how do we then roll this out further, and they've been instrumental in how this has been used throughout Save the Children, and we see that they're going to be the people that are literally going to be driving it forward. The role of the L&D will be taking much more of a back seat. So there's a lot going on at SAVE, and you know, this is certainly one part of it. But if you think about that message at the beginning where we talk about how technology is going to be used to actually make sure that we're, you know, no longer in a world where children die of preventable diseases, the way that we can use technology to build capability in the field for our field staff is going to be instrumental in this. Not just with, you know, kind of short clippings like you've seen now, but actually in how do we measure that nutrition is going in the right way? How do we do M&E better? How are we much more effective on our humanitarian response? And there are key areas that we're now looking at in order to how do we roll this out wider based on, you know, the original premise, which was us building 5 pieces of content.
I'm just going to ask one more thing, Sam, to comment on before we go into the actual case study, which is the uptake of the 200 pieces of material that are being syndicated around, and that's what we call the Trojan horse strategy. Now, Sam has already indicated the kind of the cultural and the sign-off system in terms of branding and so on, but some of you may have found other barriers, if you like, to implementing innovation, be it technological, and so on and so forth. And what we've called this somewhat mischievously is the Trojan horse strategy. So for example, some of the trainers going around the world have been empowered by us to just go and give out QR codes and links to people directly that need to use this as well. So we've begun to virally launch the material all over the world as well. So just rather than waiting for sign off at the center, we've taken Gary Hamel's quote from earlier, when did the revolution ever start with the monarchy? And we're actually going out and tracking the uptake and usage and using that data to actually sell back to the center that this is actually being used.
Yeah.
So rather than waiting around, we've called this the Trojan horse strategy.
Yeah, and it's really important that we've linked it to key events. So we've just got the performance management process that's going through. We've got new competencies, and this has been a really good way for us to start kind of opening it up to the wider organisation and other members, is to be by saying, actually, you know, performance management is the same. You know, the GROW model, we all use it, feedback. And so we're able to use events such as this to actually start saying, these are the modules that you should start looking at. So that's been another key way that we can start saying to the organisation, you know, key events are a real keen way to start tracking that information.
So we're going to move on now just to look at the data itself and some usage. Now, by the way, this is available for you online, so you don't need to take notes if you want to. And in fact, in the current edition of this event magazine, I think it's called Inside Learning, there's an article about this as well. So I'm going to give you a link in the QR code at the end, which has these slides, but also access to the article that actually sets out what we do. So essentially what we did is we targeted 9 countries in particular. This is a quote from one of the trainers that's going around. Barbara is one of your key trainers, and every time I interact with Barbara, she's in the Yemen on the way over to Cambodia on the way over. So she's got a passport with probably more stamps than whatever. And again, what she does is that she kind of is virally marketing the stuff on the ground wherever she goes. So she's covering a massive amount of terrain. But in particular, we focused in on 9 territories that are active users of what we've done, doing quantitative and qualitative research as well on how it's working, how can we course adjust as well. So as I said, this data is available for you online, but there were some interesting insights. Some of them are common sense in terms of, say, infrastructure, but this is in terms of the spread that we got. And then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on Ethiopia. Ethiopia is probably one of the areas that actually uses our stuff the most, actually, and give us a lot of feedback as well on what's happening. So we've got a little bit of a deep dive on Save the Children Ethiopia. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of the spread of countries, Sam? Or
No, not at the moment.
Okay,
hopefully
good.
some Q&A will come out of it.
Just a little bit of data as well in terms of mobile phone subscriptions as well. And we're looking that sub-Saharan Africa is actually really picking up now in terms of access to mobile technology. So there's that phrase that's been going around now for over a decade in terms of leapfrogging. But the mobile, in our view, is becoming one of the key ways of getting the message across to things. So it's becoming a core part of life, which is great. So rather than waiting on fixed line infrastructure, people are leapfrogging and using more and more of in-the-cloud content to do so as well. So when you see there in terms of subscriptions, that goes back to 11, but the trend is where you see this is happening as well. And if you go to the next slide, actually, we did a piece on the mobile finance, which is absolutely core as well. Now, mobile finance will tend not to need to use smartphones. They'll use feature phones, i.e. they're not always connected to the internet. When we transact video, we'll tend to want to get connected to the internet, so smartphones are better, clearly. We started at SkillPill in 2006, so before there were smartphones, so we're not bad at getting content across to pretty old phones, because when we started with corporates, they'd say there's a Nokia 6020, put it on that with half a meg of memory. So we've used various systems to syndicate content across feature phones. But mobile finance really is feature phone rich in that sense, doesn't need a smartphone, and hence you see massive distribution in, say, Uganda and Kenya as well. So if we go to the next slide, Sam. So then we asked them the reasons for accessing mobile learning. And you can see there the spread of examples and so on. The bit that we like as well, and this is for those of you that work in the commercial sector, is to us the best use of mobile anyway. And in some ways mobile learning is a bit of a misnomer, although on our stand it says mobile learning. It's really about performance support. So the best use of the mobile is to reinforce what you already know, right? It's as simple as that. And if you can kind of create a bridge between a different intervention, be it face-to-face or e-learning, and a mobile, you've got the best use of both worlds. Because obviously, as we all know, going back to 1886 in Eppinghaus, people forget a lot of stuff, and the estimates are about 85% is lost after 6 weeks. So to try and make that more efficient, mobile plays a really good role, but it is in performance support rather than replacement. Now, of course, if it's the only way of getting content out there, it's better than nothing. So there you see there the example of topping up learning. Again, downloading mechanism. And again, you'll see this when we go to the deep dive for Ethiopia. People are using Wi-Fi pretty smartly. So you've got very variable infrastructure when it comes to data access. So people are topping up a lot using office Wi-Fi. So they'll go to a center, so we go to see Ethiopia. There is very little data infrastructure in the rural parts, which is where Save the Children does its work. So they'll top up the content in a Wi-Fi area, in an office, in an urban environment, and then use it offline. So there's a big learning point there, and probably one of the learning points of today is a native app versus HTML is very important. Because if you're depending on a constantly connected device, it isn't really going to work. So you need asynchronous access. So you need essentially a native app that can top up, and then you go and you use it. So from a technical perspective, native apps are the way to go, although I'm personally a fan of HTML for places that you have got a dependable infrastructure. Again, there's their views in terms of reliability. So you've broadly got reliably kicking in. We had no people said that it wasn't reliable at all, but you'll see when we look at some of the comments that come in, people are distrustful of the dependability of it as well, broadly. So this is sort of counterintuitive when it comes to mobile. When we designed SkillPill, we were trying to create just-in-time learning for folks that have an impulse. So I'm out and about and I need to sit down with a customer, let me get the content, and then you react to it. Here, there are much more what we call considered users, people who are preparing for events by topping up in advance. So if you take your market economy of learning, you've got two users, your trigger user who react to events and your considered user who prepare for it. You see much more a different profile here, which is your considered users, who have been pushed into that by the potential unreliability of the infrastructure. So they prepare better, let's put it that way. And again, in terms of the profile, no surprise these days. Apple doing very well. $12 billion of profit in the last quarter. Be nice if they actually spent some of it on social responsibility projects. Apple is a disgrace when it comes to social responsibility. They have $12 billion sitting probably in an Irish bank somewhere doing nobody any good at all. They could borrow that money easily. But there you go. But Microsoft is obviously the geeks, but they're the ones who've saved 6 million people, the population of Denmark so far, through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I've got very little time for Apple, to be frank. And then you've got the signal reliability. So that feeds back into it. If you kind of toggle on to the deep dive to Ethiopia, we'll pull out a few things and maybe some people want to ask some questions. Here's some interesting comments coming through as well. And people were very honest and open about various things as well. Any of the typographical errors, we didn't change people's comments, so if it's misspelled, that's the way we got it. It's not just my bad PowerPoint. So the content they're referring to here, by the way, are more management and leadership stuff, things like personal effectiveness, leading teams, motivation levels, handling stress, and so on and so forth. It's quite a broad range of material that's been syndicated to them. So again, you see technical restrictions coming through. But the trend is our friend, and when we look at Ethiopia, we'll find that actually the pace of change within infrastructure is actually very, very rapid indeed. Then cost will be the issue next, once you've got the technical bit sorted out. And that these are the types of things that are viewed. So we took a snapshot last year to correlate with the data that we did, and these are the types of things that people are broadly liking. So in terms of Ethiopia itself, so data is still seen as quite expensive. Access to smartphones is pretty limited. But also, I guess, where Save the Children do some of its best work as well, Sam.
Mm. I mean, just interesting enough for Ethiopia, I delivered a training course, a management development training course in Ethiopia a couple of years ago, and it took us a day to get there, and some of the people in some of the field offices, it was taking them 2 to 3 days to get there. So you can imagine, we're actually travelling halfway across the world, and they're travelling across their own country, and it's taken them 2 to 3 days to get to the local office. So that's the kind of environment that they're working in.
So there's some cheaper handset devices, so the Android phone, and also the infrastructure is rolling out really, really quickly now. So even in the past year since we developed this case study, there's been a massive change going on. So we're seeing mobile as the key way now to transact learning right across the board. And our aim is to help Save the Children, help folks as well by actually getting content out to end users as well. So again, a lot of the work that Save the Children actually do are in rural areas, but the internet access is actually in urban environments. So essentially there's this phenomenon of topping up and loading up before they move on. Is there anything you want to say about the urban v rural environment in Ethiopia, Sam, in terms of where you did your training?
Well, we did ours in Addis, but as I said, you had people travelling 2 to 3 days, and the environment they were working in was quite rough. However, we talk about mobile phones from, say, the children's staff perspective. Even if it is just a Nokia, they all had them, and they could see this as being the way that they would actually have contact. Whether it's phone calls, texts, or through the internet, that was the way that they would get contact with the outside world.
Okay. So again, easy to use, clear explanations. These are the things, the convenience that people are after as well. So as the mobile and cloud becomes more and more established, you're looking for convenience as one of the main drivers for content as well. They don't want long-form, complex, prescriptive material, easy to use, intuitive, and so on. And some of the work that we've done indicates that essentially you have a 5-minute transaction. So from the identification of need, I need to see some stuff on, it might be personal brand or on building confidence, through to fulfillment, i.e. I've got the object and I've consumed it. You have a 5-minute horizon or a way of actually setting it out. So you've got 5 minutes to do so. Any more than that, you've lost your customer. Okay?
And why it's interesting that they're the biggest user is in fact, most of our field staff, there's such a desperate need to get access to learning and improve themselves, so much more than, in the UK or the West. And I think that's what's really key for us moving forward is, this audience is really wanting to kind of have this access and to really learn and to be thinking of whichever way that they do it. I mean, they travel for ages, they sit there patiently downloading a load of content just that they've got that access to learning. And so that's phenomenal. And I think that, we can only hope that that access is going to be easier for them to get hold of in the future.
Okay. So there's the link if anybody wants to see an article written up on this. We just try to keep it top line. There's a lot more detail on it, but also try to make it relevant to where we're standing here in London. There's a QR code, you can get the content as well. If anybody's got any thoughts or questions, if you want to shout it out, we'll happy to respond. So I guess the question is also around, is it a generic or portable inside? I believe it is, actually. I see, aside from the infrastructure issues, everything else that we've seen here could be for Goldman Sachs, who we support. So essentially the same type of content, the same parameters are actually there as well. So taking a radically different population. Clearly the needs are different, but people are struggling with infrastructure. But as you're going to see, people are very innovative and clever about working around and topping up as well. And as long as you support them and give them choice, that's important. But the issue of convenience and fast access is absolutely key. There's a great book called Hooked, which is around how to make learning sticky, if anybody wants to look at it. Really, really fantastic book, but it shows you how you use triggers and motivators to create new learning behaviors. And we've used some of that methodology in terms of how we set out what we do. So it's a fantastic book called Hooked, very short, easy to read, but it's all around this idea of convenience. If things are inconvenient, people don't look at them. And it's been an insight to me because I'm kind of skeptical about the idea of convenience. I thought, well, if the need is great enough, people will find a way. Actually, convenience is a much bigger strategic driver than I thought it would be, actually. I.e., if it's inconvenient, it doesn't happen. Okay, so Sam, it's around foundation learning. So this is the top-up stuff. Do you want to say a little bit about the foundation learning at SAVE?
So are you talking about mobile or just generally? So we try to do a variety of foundations. We have face-to-face, we use self-paced modules, especially for compliance stuff like, we've just done some data protection and our code of conduct. So there's a lot of kind of online that you can get out automatically. But what we're doing as well is we're also looking at gamification for some of our onboarding. Our management and leadership stuff's done by face-to-face. But again, it's how do we also link in with the other tools as well, so it's not just a one-off event. What we're really looking for, is around the continuous learning. So making sure that whatever we do is linked into a wider learning path, and that's why the top-ups are quite good, because again, it's just a way to revisit that information. It's much more easier, obviously, in countries that we can have access to, but one of the big things that we're driving for at the moment is how are we building capability in the field so they can also run face-to-face, so it's not always us coming out and doing it on a very ad hoc basis. The idea is that we have, you know, people trained up in the field so they can also be learning champions and to take some of those things forward. So whereas mobile is definitely really key, it's just not one of the only methods, it's just part of the methodology that we're using.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Okay.